Okay, in the words of River Song, spoilers next. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and today we're talking about Demons of the Punjab, and we go back to 1947 India. This is back in history of Yaz's grandmother. Now, the doctor has always avoided trying to take people back in their own timeline because you cannot cross your own timeline. In this case, it goes back to Yaz's ancestors, so it's somebody she knows before she knows them. And kind of an interesting fantasy. What if you lived in a time where you could go back and meet your own parents or your own grandparents? Kind of an interesting idea. I don't know anything about the politics. I barely know of the division of a number of countries in 1947 after World War II, so I'm not going to speak of it here. So I'll leave it to others that know the history better to comment upon that. However, I find that on this day before Partition Day that the doctor and crew find themselves at, they are confronted by something the doctor says that she remembers from way back, ancient race, the Jarvians. And this race was a race of assassins. Although, as we have seen in past Doctor Who episodes, what appears to be the bad guy is not. In the case of the Spiders episode, the Spiders were not the bad guys. They actually were just mutated by the toxic waste dump. And then even in the previous episode where they're on the hospital ship, the alien there was merely trying to get a good meal of energy, and once given that, he was happy to float off into space. And so it is this time. This time, the Jarvians, I can barely say it, had reformed in the years since the doctor had heard about them and actually were there to observe the deaths, kind of like the Ouds did for the 10th Doctor. They sang his song as he went to his death before regeneration. These are a people who destroyed their own planet through their own wars and assassinations, and now they have a collection of all that's left of them, and they go from world to world at specific points in history where they can observe and be with people who would otherwise die alone. They do have transmat technology, and we haven't heard of transmats in a long time. I don't think even in the reboot of Doctor Who they've used that term. It was used quite a bit in the 4th Doctor, as I recall, and the effect here is interesting. It looked like the apparition and disapparition in Harry Potter, the kind of twist of a picture as they come and go. And as we said, they have become kind of, if not the good guys, certainly not as bad as they were thought to be and not really playing a part. So, in fact, their appearance in this episode altogether was just a vehicle to keep the doctor and friends from being there for about an hour and leaving. So they were able to actually witness what was going on. That seems to be the only purpose, at least in the narrative, for those people to be there at all, and possibly to throw the viewer, like us, a curveball to make sure that we didn't see it coming, that it wasn't somebody trying to interfere with history this time like in the first episode, but rather just someone who's also there to observe. In fact, the doctor probably did more interference than anybody else did. And I was a little surprised by the end of the episode that what the grandmother didn't want to tell Yaz was that she'd met the doctor and this unusual person. It seems like that might have gone in, but I commend the writers for at least not putting that in, that in talking with her grandmother later, she doesn't want to know the story of the watch because, of course, she already knows the story of the watch. A couple of things that we see in here: the control panel of the TARDIS. We notice that in addition to usual switches and knobs, there's also a faucet in which they're able to take the watch and find out where it came from. And in fact, the TARDIS was pretty accurate in putting them back where they belonged because the watch did come from that day. Also, when the doctor had to analyze the dust that she had gotten from the Thajarians, she needed chicken poop and cow spit and a biscuit, which is reinforcing the fact that when they first introduced the TARDIS gave her a biscuit. So this is going to be her jelly babies, her jammy dodgers, if you will. So we'll probably see more of that in upcoming episodes. And one good line, it was given by Graham, and once again, I think Graham has become, if not the conscience of this group, he certainly has been a voice of wisdom here. And when he says, all we can aspire to be is a good man. I thought that was words we could live with. Being nice to each other is good. So it's a message for an audience of children, but that's kind of where Doctor Who is going these days. The one thing that really bothered me was brother against brother. Brothers fight their problems from time to time, but there's never a time in my experience where a brother would want to kill another. I mean, there's, of course, biblical references to brothers killing each other, but it seems, at least in my experience, a little far-fetched. Perhaps I've lived a sheltered life on points of that. As always, I look forward to reading your comments. I read all of them, answer most of them, and I hope that you will also subscribe and click the bell in order to get notification of when the next video comes your way. In the meantime, don't go far.